They told me my replacement had 3 degrees from prestigious universities and spoke 4 languages fluently. What they didn't mention was that she would spend her first 7 hours frantically calling me, begging for help with tasks I used to handle in my sleep, before finally admitting through tears that she was completely lost. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and desperation when Margaret Chen called me in that Tuesday morning. I'd been with Meridian Financial for 18 years, starting as a junior analyst and working my way up to senior operations manager. The mahogany table gleamed under fluorescent lights as I took my usual seat, but something felt different. Margaret's smile was too bright, too rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "Sarah, thank you for coming in early," she said, her voice carrying that artificially sweet tone managers use when they're about to deliver bad news. "I know this might seem sudden, but we've been evaluating our departmental structure, and we've decided to bring in some fresh perspectives." Fresh perspectives. The corporate euphemism that made my stomach clench. I'd heard those words before, whispered in hallways about other long-term employees who'd mysteriously vanished from their desks one day, replaced by younger faces with shinier credentials. "We're bringing in Dr. Amanda Richardson," Margaret continued, sliding a pristine resume across the table. "She has her MBA from Wharton, a master's in international finance from London School of Economics, and she just completed her PhD in organizational psychology from Stanford. She's exactly what we need to modernize our approach." I picked up the resume, scanning the impressive list of achievements. Summa cum laude, Dean's List, published research papers, fluency in English, Spanish, French, and Mandarin. On paper, Amanda Richardson was a powerhouse. But as I read through her work experience, I noticed something peculiar. Despite all her education, her actual hands-on experience was limited to internships and academic projects. She had never managed a real crisis, never dealt with irate clients at 3 a.m, never had to make split-second decisions that could cost the company millions. "Sarah, you've been incredible over the years," Margaret said, her voice softening with what I assumed was supposed to be compassion. "But the financial industry is evolving rapidly. We need someone who understands the latest theories, someone who can bring academic rigor to our processes." Dr. Richardson's research on behavioral economics and her dissertation on risk management in volatile markets make her uniquely qualified to lead this department into the future. The words stung, but I kept my expression neutral. 18 years of dedication, of staying late to fix other people's mistakes, of mentoring junior staff, of navigating the company through the 2008 financial crisis and the pandemic uncertainty, apparently meant less than a stack of diplomas. "I understand," I said quietly, though understanding and accepting were 2 very different things. "What's the timeline?" "Dr. Richardson starts Monday. We'd like you to spend the rest of this week training her, showing her the ropes. We want to ensure a smooth transition." A smooth transition. As if nearly 2 decades of institutional knowledge could be downloaded like a software update. The rest of the week passed in a blur of handover meetings and documentation sessions. Amanda Richardson arrived on Thursday for her orientation, and I had to admit, she made an impressive first impression. Tall, confident, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She spoke with the kind of polished eloquence that comes from years of academic presentations and conference talks. "Sarah, I've heard wonderful things about your work here," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm looking forward to learning from your experience while bringing some innovative approaches to the department." She was charming, articulate, and genuinely seemed to respect my expertise. For a moment, I wondered if maybe Margaret was right. Maybe the department did need someone with Amanda's theoretical background to complement the practical experience the team had built over the years. We spent Thursday and Friday going through the major accounts, the critical processes, the unwritten rules that kept everything running smoothly. Amanda took copious notes on her iPad, asking intelligent questions about risk assessments and client relationship management. She nodded knowingly when I explained our crisis response protocols and seemed particularly interested in our compliance procedures. "This is fascinating," she said as I showed her the complex spreadsheet system I'd developed to track cross-departmental projects. Though I have to say, there are some really innovative software solutions that could streamline a lot of these manual processes. I wrote a paper on digital transformation in financial services that addresses exactly these kinds of inefficiencies. I smiled politely, though her comment stung. She'd been here 2 days and was already identifying inefficiencies in systems that had been refined through years of trial and error, systems that had never once failed during a crisis. On Friday afternoon, as I packed up my personal items, Amanda stopped by my desk. "Sarah, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've shown me. I know transitions can be difficult, but I'm confident we can build on the strong foundation you've established here." Her words were kind, but there was an underlying assumption that her arrival marked an improvement, an upgrade. I thanked her and wished her luck, though part of me wondered how long her confidence would last once she was facing real challenges without the safety net of my guidance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Over the weekend, I tried to process the change. I'd been given a generous severance package and glowing references, so financially I was secure for a while. But emotionally, I felt adrift. Meridian Financial had been more than just a job. It had been my professional identity, my second home, my life's work. Monday morning, I found myself at loose ends. For the first time in 18 years, I didn't have anywhere urgent to be at 7 a.m. I made coffee, read the newspaper, tried to enjoy the luxury of a leisurely morning. But by 10 o'clock, my phone started ringing. The first call came from Jake Morrison, one of the junior analysts I'd trained. His voice was strained, almost panicked. "Sarah, I know you're not supposed to be working anymore, but we have a situation with the Henderson account, and Dr. Richardson asked me to call you. There's something about the quarterly reconciliation that doesn't match our records, and she's not sure how to proceed." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. The Henderson account was one of our most complex clients, with multiple subsidiary companies and intricate reporting requirements. It wasn't the kind of account you could figure out from textbooks. "Jake, you need to check the subsidiary mapping in the October files," I said, walking him through the solution. There was a corporate restructuring that created some reporting anomalies. The reconciliation process is documented in the Henderson folder, subsection 3. "Thank you so much, Sarah. Dr. Richardson has been trying to figure this out for 2 hours. 2 hours. I could have solved it in 5 minutes. The second call came an hour later, this time from Lisa Park in compliance. "Sarah, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we have an urgent regulatory filing due today. And Dr. Richardson isn't familiar with the submission process. She asked if I could reach out to you for guidance." Then came the third call, from Marcus Webb in client relations. "Sarah, the Patterson Group is threatening to pull their account. They're upset about some communication breakdown, and Dr. Richardson isn't sure how to handle the situation. You know how particular they are about protocol." By noon, I'd received 7 calls from different departments. Each time, the story was the same. Dr. Richardson was struggling with practical applications of the theoretical knowledge she possessed. She understood the concepts, but couldn't navigate the real-world complexities that made our operations unique. The 8th call came directly from Amanda herself. Her voice was shaky, lacking the confidence she'd displayed just days earlier. "Sarah, I hate to bother you, but I'm dealing with a crisis situation that's beyond anything I studied in school. The Morrison Industries account is showing some irregularities that could indicate fraud, but I'm not sure how to proceed without potentially damaging our relationship with them. Could you possibly walk me through the protocol?" Fraud investigation was serious business, requiring a delicate balance of thoroughness and discretion. It wasn't something you learned from case studies. It was something you developed through experience, through making mistakes and learning from them, through understanding the nuanced relationships between clients, regulatory bodies, and internal stakeholders. I spent 45 minutes on the phone with Amanda, walking her through the step-by-step process, explaining the legal implications, the documentation requirements, the communication strategies. She was clearly intelligent and absorbed the information quickly, but there's a difference between understanding a process intellectually and having the confidence to execute it under pressure. By 4 o'clock, I'd received 12 calls total. Amanda had personally called me 4 times, each conversation lasting longer than the previous one. Her initial confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by barely contained panic as she realized that managing a department involved far more than applying theoretical frameworks to hypothetical scenarios. The final call came at 6:30, just as I was considering whether to order takeout for dinner. Amanda's voice was thick with exhaustion and defeat. "Sarah, I need to be honest with you. I've been here for 7 hours, and I feel completely overwhelmed. Everyone keeps asking me questions about processes and procedures that weren't covered in any of my coursework. I've called you more times today than I called anyone during my entire PhD program." She paused, and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. "I'm brilliant in a classroom setting. I excel at research and analysis. But this is different. This requires a kind of practical wisdom that you can't get from textbooks. I've been arrogant to think that my degrees could substitute for your years of experience." There was another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm lost, Sarah. Completely lost. And I think I've made a terrible mistake." The admission hung in the air between us. Here was someone who had spent years accumulating credentials, who had been hired specifically because her qualifications looked impressive on paper, confessing that none of her education had prepared her for the reality of the job. "Amanda," I said gently, "experience isn't something you can fast-track. It's built one day at a time, one crisis at a time, one success and failure at a time. The fact that you're recognizing this now shows wisdom, not weakness." "But what am I supposed to do?" she asked. "Margaret hired me to revolutionize the department, to bring fresh perspectives and modern approaches. How do I tell her that I can't even handle the basic day-to-day operations?" It was a fair question, and one that highlighted the fundamental disconnect between what companies thought they wanted and what they actually needed. They wanted innovation and fresh thinking, but they also needed competence and reliability. They wanted to modernize, but they also needed someone who understood the intricate systems that kept everything functioning. "Amanda, there's no shame in admitting when you're in over your head," I said. "The shame would be in pretending you can handle something you can't, and letting the department suffer because of pride." That evening, I reflected on the day's events. In 7 hours, Amanda had encountered more real-world challenges than her academic career had prepared her for. She'd been hired for her credentials, but credentials without experience were like having a map without knowing how to read it. I thought about all the calls I'd received, all the problems that had required immediate solutions, all the institutional knowledge that couldn't be captured in any manual or training program. Each crisis had been a learning opportunity, each mistake a stepping stone toward competence. But more importantly, each experience had been built on the foundation of previous experiences, creating a web of understanding that enabled quick, confident decision-making. Amanda's struggle wasn't a reflection of her intelligence or potential. She was clearly brilliant, articulate, and capable of complex analytical thinking. But intelligence without experience is like having a powerful engine without a transmission. All that potential energy can't be effectively converted into forward motion. As I prepared for bed that night, I wondered what tomorrow would bring. Would Amanda find her footing and gradually develop the practical skills she needed? Would Margaret recognize that hiring someone based solely on credentials had been a mistake? Or would the department continue to struggle while Amanda tried to bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application? One thing was certain: the next few days would be telling. The financial services industry doesn't pause for learning curves, and clients don't care about degrees when their money is on the line. Amanda would either adapt quickly or find herself in an impossible situation, and the department would either rally around her or begin to fracture under the pressure of inexperienced leadership. The irony wasn't lost on me. After 18 years of dedicated service, I'd been replaced by someone who needed my help to survive her first day. But perhaps that was the real lesson in all of this. Experience isn't just valuable, it's irreplaceable. And sometimes, the most impressive resume is just a beautifully formatted piece of paper that means nothing when faced with the messy, complicated reality of actually doing the work. The next morning brought a text message that changed everything. It was from Amanda, sent at 5:47 a.m. "Sarah, I'm resigning today. I can't do this to the team or to myself. Thank you for your kindness yesterday." I stared at the message over my coffee, feeling a mixture of sympathy and vindication. 7 hours. That's all it had taken for someone with 3 prestigious degrees to realize that academic excellence doesn't automatically translate to professional competence. By 8:30 a.m., my phone was buzzing with calls from Meridian Financial. The first came from Jake Morrison, his voice tight with concern. "Sarah, Dr. Richardson just submitted her resignation. She left a note saying she wasn't qualified for the position, and that the department needs someone with your level of experience." Margaret is in full panic mode. The second call came from Marcus Webb. "Sarah, this is chaos. Amanda barely made it through her first day, and now we're back to square one. The Patterson Group is still threatening to leave, the Henderson account reconciliation is incomplete, and we have 3 regulatory deadlines this week. Margaret wants to know if you'd consider coming back." I let that request sit unanswered while I processed what was happening. In less than 24 hours, the narrative had completely flipped. The woman hired to modernize and revolutionize the department had walked away, admitting defeat. The fresh perspective had lasted exactly 1 business day, but the most revealing call came from Lisa Park in compliance. "Sarah, I feel terrible about how this all went down. When Margaret announced you were being replaced, several of us tried to voice our concerns, but she was so convinced that Dr. Richardson's credentials made her the obvious choice. She kept saying we needed to embrace change and stop being resistant to new ideas. This was the first I was hearing about internal resistance to my replacement. It turned out that several department members had privately questioned the decision, recognizing that my role required deep institutional knowledge that couldn't be acquired through academic study alone." Margaret scheduled an emergency staff meeting for this afternoon, Lisa continued. "She wants to discuss, quote, immediate solutions to our staffing crisis. Between you and me, I think she's finally realizing that credentials don't equal competence." The third call was the one I'd been expecting. Margaret's voice was strained, lacking the confident authority she'd displayed just days earlier. "Sarah, I know this is awkward, but we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. Dr. Richardson has decided that our position isn't the right fit for her career trajectory, and we need to ensure continuity for our clients." Career trajectory. Even in crisis, Margaret couldn't bring herself to admit the real reason Amanda had quit. It wasn't about career fit. It was about capability. "I was wondering if you might consider returning to help us through this transition period," Margaret continued. "Obviously, we'd need to discuss terms, but your institutional knowledge would be invaluable during this challenging time." I found Margaret's request fascinating from a psychological perspective. Less than a week earlier, she'd essentially told me that my approach was outdated, that the department needed someone with modern credentials and fresh ideas. Now, faced with the collapse of that experiment, she was asking me to return as if nothing had happened. But I'd spent the past few days doing some serious reflection about my career and my value in the marketplace. Amanda's struggle had highlighted something important. Experience isn't just valuable, it's rare. The combination of deep industry knowledge, crisis management skills, and institutional memory that I possessed couldn't be replicated through education alone. "Margaret, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in returning to Meridian Financial," I said, surprising myself with how confident I sounded. "However, I'd be happy to consult on specific projects if the department needs guidance during this transition." The consulting offer was strategic. It acknowledged their immediate need while establishing that my relationship with the company had fundamentally changed. I was no longer an employee seeking approval. I was a professional offering expertise on my terms. Over the next few days, I received multiple consulting requests from Meridian Financial. Each project reinforced the same truth. The knowledge I'd accumulated over 18 years couldn't be easily replaced or quickly transferred. Every crisis I'd navigated, every client relationship I'd built, every process I'd refined, had contributed to a unique professional skill set. But the most unexpected development came from an entirely different direction. Dr. Amanda Richardson called me directly on Thursday, her voice much steadier than it had been during our previous conversations. "Sarah, I wanted to thank you for your patience and professionalism during my brief tenure at Meridian," she said. "I also wanted to ask if you might be interested in collaborating on something." She explained that her experience at Meridian Financial had been a profound learning opportunity, highlighting the gap between academic theory and practical application in financial services. Rather than viewing her failure as a career setback, she was treating it as research data. I'm developing a new approach to executive education that combines theoretical frameworks with practical mentorship, Amanda continued. Traditional MBA programs prepare students for case studies, but they don't prepare them for the messy reality of actual management. I think there's an opportunity to create something better. Her proposal was intriguing. She wanted to develop a consulting firm that paired academically trained professionals with experienced practitioners for complex organizational challenges. The academic partners would bring theoretical rigor and research capabilities, while the experienced partners would provide practical wisdom and implementation expertise. Sarah, your ability to navigate complex situations and translate theoretical concepts into actionable strategies is exactly what the industry needs, Amanda said. I spent years studying organizational behavior, but you've actually managed organizational behavior. That's the difference between knowledge and wisdom. The idea sparked something in me that I hadn't felt in years: genuine excitement about professional growth. Instead of being threatened by academic credentials, I could leverage them. Instead of competing with theoretical knowledge, I could complement it. We scheduled a meeting to discuss the concept further, and I found myself energized by the possibilities. Amanda's academic background could provide the research foundation and credibility needed to develop new methodologies, while my practical experience could ensure those methodologies actually worked in real-world conditions. The collaboration represented something larger than just a business opportunity. It was a recognition that the traditional either-or approach to experience versus education was fundamentally flawed. The best solutions often emerged from combining different types of expertise, rather than privileging one over the other. Meanwhile, the situation at Meridian Financial continued to evolve. Margaret had hired a temporary consultant to manage day-to-day operations, while conducting a more thorough search for a permanent replacement. But according to my contacts within the company, the search process had become much more rigorous. They're actually interviewing people with relevant experience now, Jake told me during one of our conversations. Margaret seems to have learned that impressive credentials don't guarantee success in this role. The shift in hiring criteria represented a broader recognition within the company that specialized roles require specialized experience. Financial operations management isn't just about understanding financial theory. It's about understanding how that theory applies within the specific context of regulatory requirements, client relationships, and organizational dynamics. But perhaps the most satisfying development was the feedback I received from former colleagues about the department's current state. Despite having a qualified temporary consultant and access to my documentation, the team was struggling with efficiency and decision-making speed. It's not that the temp consultant isn't competent, Lisa explained. She knows what she's doing, but she doesn't have the institutional memory that made you so effective. Every decision requires research and deliberation, because she doesn't have the context that comes from years of experience. This observation highlighted another crucial aspect of professional expertise: context. Understanding how current situations relate to previous experiences allows for faster, more confident decision-making. Without that contextual framework, even competent professionals have to approach each challenge as if it's completely novel. As Amanda and I developed our consulting concept, we decided to use my experience at Meridian Financial as a case study. The week-long experiment of replacing experience with credentials had generated valuable insights about organizational change, leadership transitions, and the integration of theoretical and practical knowledge. Your story illustrates something that business schools rarely address, Amanda noted during one of our planning sessions. They teach students to analyze organizational problems, but they don't teach them to recognize their own limitations or to value the expertise of others. We began developing a methodology that we called integrated leadership development, which combined academic rigor with practical mentorship. The approach recognized that effective leadership requires both conceptual understanding and experiential wisdom, and that the best leaders are those who can bridge the gap between theory and practice. The first pilot program would focus on financial services, drawing on both Amanda's research background and my operational experience. We planned to work with organizations that were struggling with leadership transitions, particularly those involving the replacement of experienced professionals with academically credentialed but inexperienced managers. Our marketing approach emphasized the complementary nature of our backgrounds rather than positioning them as competing qualifications. Amanda's academic credentials provided credibility in research and methodology development, while my practical experience provided credibility in implementation and results. The response from potential clients was overwhelmingly positive. Many organizations had experienced their own versions of the Meridian Financial situation, where impressive credentials had failed to translate into effective performance. They were eager to explore approaches that valued both intellectual capability and practical wisdom. 6 months after leaving Meridian Financial, I found myself in a position I never could have imagined. Instead of managing a single department within one company, I was helping multiple organizations develop more effective approaches to leadership and organizational change. The consulting work was intellectually stimulating in ways that my previous role hadn't been. Each client presented unique challenges that required creative problem-solving and strategic thinking. I was drawing on my accumulated experience while continuously learning new approaches and perspectives. Amanda and I had developed a strong working relationship based on mutual respect and complementary expertise. She brought analytical rigor and research capabilities that elevated our work beyond simple experiential advice, while I brought practical insights that ensured our recommendations were actually implementable. Our success attracted attention from other experienced professionals who had been marginalized in favor of younger, more credentialed candidates. We began building a network of consultants who combined deep industry experience with ongoing professional development, creating a new model for late-career professional growth. The irony of my situation wasn't lost on me. By being replaced at Meridian Financial, I'd been forced to recognize and articulate my own value in ways I never had before. The experience had been painful, but it had also been liberating. I was no longer dependent on a single organization's recognition of my worth. I was creating my own definition of professional success. Looking back, Amanda's 7-hour tenure at Meridian Financial had been the catalyst for multiple positive changes. It had forced the company to reconsider their hiring practices, led to the development of our consulting firm, and created opportunities for experienced professionals who had been overlooked by credential-focused organizations. The experience had taught me that professional setbacks often contain the seeds of future opportunities, but only if you're willing to learn from them rather than simply endure them. Amanda's willingness to admit her limitations and seek collaboration rather than competition had turned a potential failure into a foundation for innovation. As I prepared for our next client presentation, I reflected on how much my professional identity had evolved. 6 months earlier, I'd been Sarah Martinez, Senior Operations Manager at Meridian Financial. Now I was Sarah Martinez, co-founder of Integrated Leadership Solutions, combining 18 years of financial services experience with cutting-edge research on organizational development. The transformation had required me to view my experience not as something that could be easily replaced, but as something that could be leveraged, developed, and shared. Instead of feeling threatened by credentials, I'd learned to appreciate how they could complement experience. Instead of seeing Amanda as a replacement, I'd found in her a collaborative partner who brought different but valuable perspectives. The 7 hours that had initially seemed like a professional disaster had ultimately become the foundation for the most fulfilling work of my career. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being forced to recognize your own irreplaceable value. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.